Welcome to the Maxwell Leadership Podcast. This is the podcast that adds value to leaders who multiply value to others. My name is Mark Cole, and for 23 years, I've ridden shotgun beside John Maxwell, and I've watched him make every day count. And so today, John is going to teach us 10 ways to make sure you're growing every day. How can you and I start out this week? Perhaps this is the beginning of the year for many of you listening live. And today is a day you can begin making a difference. Now, as you listen to the podcast, if you would like to download the bonus resource for this episode or watch us on YouTube, go to maxwellpodcast.com/everyday. I'm excited to grow this year with you on the Maxwell Podcast. I'm excited to grow today. Here is John Maxwell.
I have decided to grow and improve daily. George Knox in Leadership Magazine said, "When you cease to be better, you cease to be good. When you stop growing, you cease to be useful. A weed in the garden of prosperity." We are what we are today because we were what we were yesterday, and our thoughts today will determine our actions tomorrow. And the path from ordinary to the extraordinary is continual improvement. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to daily choose to improve. Many people realize that I am continually in a personal growth plan. I have been since 1973. And many years ago, I heard a wonderful lesson on growth. I have some wonderful friends in the Kansas City area, Vern and Charlene Armitage. Vern and Charlene are terrific people. What Charlene taught was this: life's goals are reached by setting annual goals, and annual goals are reached by setting daily goals, and daily goals are reached by doing things which may be uncomfortable at first, but eventually will become habits, and habits are powerful things. Habits turn actions into attitudes, and attitudes into lifestyles. So for many years now, I've set an intellectual goal, I've set a physical goal, I've set a spiritual goal, and I've set a relational goal. Now, that's simple, isn't it? But it's a wonderful model. It may not be the model that you want to use, but the question I'm asking you is, are you improving every day? Have you made the decision, and have you developed a discipline in which every day you say, I'm improving. I'm improving physically. I'm improving, hopefully, mentally. I'm hopefully improving relationally. What's your gauge? How do you keep growing? How do you keep improving? So let me give you some improvement insights. Number one, don't be afraid to admit you were wrong. And the reason that you and I should not be afraid to admit that we were wrong is it proves you're wiser today than you were yesterday. Isn't that great? Huh? Boy, if you never admit you're wrong, you're saying, I'm not growing, I'm not wiser. So don't be afraid, just admit you're wrong. Number two, you will never change your life until you change something that you do daily. I love that statement. I could camp there for the next 20 minutes because you cannot change your life until you change something daily. The change in your life is determined about the change that you make today. Again, the secret of your success and my success is discovered in our daily agenda. Number three, you cannot manage what you cannot measure. So what you've got to do is you've got to identify the areas that growth is essential to your success, and you have to be able to measure them. Now, just a simple example, but we come up to New Year's resolutions. Somebody will say something like, I'm going to read more this year than I read last year. Okay, that's wonderful. But it's not the way to do it. If you really want to improve, don't say you're going to read more next year than you did this year. Say, every day I'm going to read 2 chapters of a book this year. Now, you see what I've done? I've got your intentions measured now. And every day you gauge your intentions by, did I read 2 chapters in a book? Or did I read 1 chapter? Or did I read 2 books a month? Or did I read 1 book a month? Okay, in other words, take your intentions and take your goals and make them measurable. Number 4, set realistic expectations for your improvement. Ian McGregor says, I work on the same principle as people who train horses. You start with low fences, easily achieved goals, and you work up. It is important in management never to ask people to try to accomplish goals they can't accept. What can you tackle in a day? Because whatever you tackle today, you need to tackle tomorrow and the next day. So you got to get it down there because that's where the compounding always comes in. Number 5, continual change is essential for continual improvement. They go together. One of the great paradoxes of success, this is true, the things which got you there are seldom the things which keep you there. Wow. Continual change is essential for continual improvement. Number 6, motivation gets you started. Habits keep you going. Number 7, another improvement insight. We overestimate what we can do in a month, and we underestimate what we can do in a year. That's just true. We are infatuated with big and fast. Boy, if I can just get there quicker. Hey, if you got a shortcut, how big's it going to be? Big and fast. Number 8, focus. William James, noted psychologist, said, if you would be rich, you will be rich. And if you would be good, you will be good. And if you would be learned, you will be learned. But wish for one thing exclusively, and don't at the same time wish for 100 other incompatible things just as strongly. Focus is what he's saying. I love this statement. I said one time, my goal was to retire when I reached 40. I have been partly successful. I reached 40. Lily Tomlin one time said, I always wanted to be somebody, but I should have been more specific. Another improvement insight. Number 9. Spend 80% of your time working on your strengths. And you've heard me in conferences say before, people don't pay for average. Got to work on your strengths. Got to stay where your gifts and your abilities are. If you work on something that is a weakness, I can promise you it's just not going to get very good. It just really isn't. From a 1 to a 10, if you're a 3, you may work hard and get up to 4. You may be able to get up to 5, but you're still average. You work on your strengths. Spend 80% of your time working on your strengths. Now, I'm talking about skills, by the way. I'm talking about skills. There are 2 weak areas that will hurt you and that you must work on. One is self-discipline, which is what we're really talking about in this lesson. And number 2 is attitude. You see, if you have all the skills and strengths of the world, but you lack self-discipline or you have a bad attitude, you will literally sabotage yourself. Insight number 10 is what I am doing today getting me closer to my goal tomorrow.
Hey, John Maxwell here. I'm in the studio. We've been recording all day. And I was thinking about really one of my very favorite experiences that we have, and that is called Day to Grow. If you want to grow in every area of your life. I tell people all the time, you don't want to go to something, you want to grow to something. But if you're passionate about personal growth, development, your team, and growing them, you do not want to miss Day to Grow. I'm going to have some real players with me. Deion Sanders, Jamie Kern-Lima, myself. Oh my gosh, you don't want to miss it. So mark it. Come and see us on Day to Grow. I will promise you this. You come and bring your team, and at the end of the day, you'll come up and shake my hand and say, one of the best days I've ever invested in for myself and for my team. I'll see you there.
Hey, everybody, welcome back. What a lesson from John. I'll tell you this, by the way, if you're listening to this current, Happy New Year. We're so glad this is the beginning of the new you, and we're so excited. If you're not listening to it, Happy New Year. Just start over. Just let's go. Because Traci Morrow and I am so excited to have Traci. Traci, what a great way to start another year together with you, co-hosting the Maxwell Leadership Podcast. I'm so glad you're here.
I'm so glad I'm here. Happy New Year. You know what? What is my problem? You know how usually at a new year you write like 23 as when you're writing your date? I wrote the other day 93 and like 1993. What a brain hiccup. What's my problem? I'm going way, way back. I went back way, way back.
If you still write checks like me just because you're stuck in the Stone Ages, don't forget to put 24 on your on your checks that you're going to send to me. Just make it right. Hey, today John is challenging us on how to improve every day. So your first moment of improvement is write the right year in the date.
It's true.
Okay?
It's true. It's true. Decade. I'd be satisfied for the right. That's 20 years back. 20 years back. My
But it was a good year, Traci. It was a good year.
It was a great year. It was a great year. So I think this is a great, you know what? It's taking me back because what I was thinking about, I was getting back into my 20s and I first heard this from John. That is a big stretch, by the way. But I learned about this when I was in my 20s. I was 22 the first time. Would you remember how old you were the first time you heard this concept from John? Can you remember back that far?
So somehow I caught a little bit of the concept when I read his first book, Developing the Leader Within You, which would have been, in probably 80s, late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah. Wow. So I was 22. So that would have been 92 or 93. So maybe I really was thinking back, but for me, this showed me that the sky was the limit. There really was no end. There really was no, this is it didn't put me into a box. And I loved that. That really is why I chose John to be my mentor, because there was no limit to my growth. And I love this lesson. And he kicks it right off with improvement insights. And the very first one, I would love to hear some insight from you, because the first one is, don't be afraid to admit that you're wrong. It proves that you're wiser today than you were yesterday, which, by the way, I hope you guys have, ladies and gents, have printed out our bonus resource, because it's so helpful to have this and put it into a binder or a notebook or something. But Mark, why do you think that it is so hard for leaders to admit, well, people in general, but for leaders to admit that they're wrong?
Yeah, so I want to answer the question, but this was just how my mind works. Every session, or almost every episode, I finish the episode with a comment from you, our listeners, our viewers. It's a way to keep you engaged. I would love for you to ask questions, give us questions. Traci and I will wrestle with your exact questions. It's just a way to stay connected with the community. And I thought, Jake, get ready. Because if our podcast listeners will take this first point to heart, don't be afraid to admit you're wrong. Our comments next episode is going to be from significant others. My wife is going to say, I love the Maxwell Leadership Podcast that I never listened to, because I finally heard my husband admit he's wrong. So for all of you that go and do this, I'm expecting a ton of comments next week from your significant other. But I digress. Traci, I do think that, isn't it true that in leadership, at least, I'm not going to say in relationships, but in leadership, isn't it true that we as the leaders put a responsibility on ourselves that we've got to always be right, perceived as right, and always have the answers?
Right.
So when we are wrong, and we are often, whether you admit it or not, it's very hard, because we have to say your perception of your leader is wrong. I didn't get it right. I didn't make the right decision, and I made a mistake. And so for us as leaders to recognize in public, admit to our teams we did it wrong, it almost tricks us to think we can't be a leader if we're wrong.
Right. I completely agree. And I think it's freeing for anyone listening to this. Kick off the new year with a new version of yourself that is willing to out yourself. Because what does John always say? If you don't admit it to your team, we think we're tricking them into thinking that they don't already know that we're wrong.
Well, I love how John says, it's a similar subject. He says, laugh at yourself. Everybody else is.
That's exactly
Well, here's the thing. Admit you're wrong. Everybody else already knows.
That's right. That's right.
Just go ahead and put it out there and let the team know that you know you're not right.
Yeah, and it brings respect to your way, because when it's comforting for our team to know that we know that we're wrong and we're humble enough to admit it. I can think of a couple podcasts ago when you talked about, when you said, made a bold statement, I'm a good leader. I'm a great leader. And part of being a great leader is saying I'm wrong, because what you said, when you're leading, you're going to be wrong. And so it's important. I know I'm kind of landing on this one with boots.
Traci,
solidly.
Just for the podcast listeners that have started out this new year, you've Googled us, and for the third year in a row, we're the #1 leadership podcast. I'm not a host that goes in and just says, hey, everybody, I'm a great leader. There's a lot of context to what Traci just shared with you that I feel the need to share with you. And that is, I was in a particular slump. I was in a particular leadership valley, and I realized that my mindset was telling myself that I was the valley rather than I was going through the valley. And it's like a batter that says, I'm a terrible batter, but his lifespan batting average is pretty high, but that particular season's bad. That was a season that Traci's just referencing, that my batting average was low, and I was having to tell myself I'm an overall pretty good leader. So there you have it. You have not joined a podcast where the host reminds you every week how good they are.
Of a bunch of egomaniacs. No. But part of good leadership is just saying, I am wrong, and telling that to your team. And so in order to be a good leader does not mean that you are never wrong. It's being humble and saying, hey, you know what? I was wrong there, and I apologize for that. And boy, does that buoy the spirit of your team. And so I love that he kind of kicks it off with that. He also kicks off with talking about the uncomfortable things that are necessary in order to develop habits. And I love all of that. And then it leads into habits, develop actions, actions develop attitudes, and attitudes develop a lifestyle. And then he lands on 4 things. He talks about the goals that he sets for himself, get areas that he gets comfortable, getting uncomfortable applying in these areas, which are intellectual and mental growth, physical growth, spiritual growth, and relational growth. 4 areas. Why, Mark? Those seem pretty simple, because what are we? We are human beings. And as human beings, every leader is a human being. Every leader is body, mind, and spirit. That is your intellectual, your mental part, your physical body, your spiritual part of yourself, and your relationships with the other human beings. Why is this something that so many leaders miss? High-end leaders miss, or at least neglect, at least one of these. They're either very highly intellectual, or they miss their physical, or they miss the relational because they are so busy with the physical and the intellectual. There's at least a miss of something. Why is it, do you think?
Well, all 4 of those areas, and maybe for the rest of us, a 5th area, a 6th area, we all have pillars in our life that are very important. Traci has definitely listed 4 that's very important in my life, and perhaps for most of you, those 4. And there may be a time or 2 more. But every one of those, we desire greatness, but we don't realize that greatness comes with the improvement every day. And so, Traci, I think the reason that I would answer that is because we do not understand what John says so often. Consistency compounds. We make a health decision, and we call it a New Year's resolution. And again, for all of you that are listening to this current, we're at the beginning of the year. 2024 is not going to be great because you made a New Year's resolution. In fact, 2024 is not going to be great because you've already done your workout before listening to Traci and I this morning. It's going to be great when December comes around if you're still consistently living out the decisions you made today in January. It is the consistency compounds that is the difference maker. It's not the decision. People make decisions every single day. It's not the fact that you did it today that makes the difference. It's that you did it day over day, day after day, week after week, month after month. And here we are in December of 2024. And you can say, I have done that on a consistent basis. Consistency really does compound. So when John says you will change your life until you won't change your life until you change something you do daily, the LY in the daily is the important thing. Not you will change your life if you do something different today than you did yesterday. Because most of us go back tomorrow to what we did yesterday and forget the moment of today. Consistency compounds day over day, week over week, month over month.
So at the end of every year, we know that you have a time where you break away and you really look at your year past and you look at the year coming forward. And so these pillars that you have, I know that you identify certain things that you're going to do. But do you also have, and ways that you'll measure them in these pillars, do you also have something that you do with your team?
I do. So every beginning of every day, in fact, in 1 week from this podcast, we will have our State of the Union. And in our State of the Union, and really we call it our State of the Culture, in our yearly address, we began to talk about what we're going to accomplish this year as a team, what we are going to challenge each of our teammates to accomplish as an individual, and what we're going to accomplish with the mission, the vision, the purpose of our organization. Because oftentimes what happens, Traci, for all of us, is we begin with a discipline in mind rather than an end in mind. And when I can begin an exercise routine with the end goal of running a marathon, I do better job with the daily discipline rather than say, I just want to run every day. When there is something, an objective, a carrot to be pushing for, things begin to happen in a much greater way. So if we want to have a better team, we want to be more profitable, we want to turn this business idea around, we begin by casting the vision of the outcome and then set the disciplines that's going to happen. Let me take a minute, Traci. This is true for each of you listening today. For all of you, this is true of you that want to create a discipline today. In fact, I've asked our team, we tried this in December, it went so well, I've asked the team to create a process that will make you better as an individual. We call it Every Day with Purpose. And here's what I want to tell you. If you want to continue your journey of improving every day, we're offering all of you, our podcast listeners, this online course, Every Day with Purpose. Now, usually this course is $199, but because it's January, because you're listening to the podcast, and because I believe with all of my heart that it is your daily discipline of constant doing it day in and day out, consistency compounds, that will make this product your best friend. So this week, rather than $99 or $199, we're going to offer it to you for just $49. If you'd like to purchase this course for yourself or maybe a teammate, maybe a growth mate, just scroll down to the show notes and wherever you're listening and click the link and take the journey with us. And I'm going to challenge you first and foremost to go the way before you tell somebody else to go the way. Show the way before you try to get somebody else to show their growth. But do take somebody with you. And Traci, again, it comes back to what I'm saying, and that is when consistency begins to compound, we look back and go, wow, I didn't know we were that good. You're not. But guess what? You're not as bad in the beginning as it feels like either. Over time, you will begin to be better, and it's because of consistency, not because you're actually all of that better. You're better because you consistently did it day in and day out.
That's right. And so I'm curious, now that you've established those things, and once you establish that with your State of the Culture, with your team, and I'm sure that people are looking to do that, even if they weren't planning on it before, they're maybe thinking of that for their team now. In those areas, maybe your pillars, intellectual and mental, physical, spiritual, and relational. Those are 4 pillars that John gave us. Those are things that I have as well. And then I might even have subcategories, like my relational I might have in my marriage, then with my kids, then with my grandkids, then with my team, with my friends. Like I might have different categories for each of those subcategories. So then once you have established those, in both your personal life, Mark, and then in your state of the culture with your team. Do you have regular check-ins like, for measuring that weekly? So you don't get to the end of the year in December of 2024 and you're like, oh, shoot, we lost everybody back in February or in June. Do you have check-ins weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually to make sure that you aren't losing track or that you need to kind of navigate or make course corrections along the way?
The answer is yes, in both our state of the culture, our team dynamics, our team plan, as well as my personal growth plan. And I've done it multiple ways where there's a weekly 30-minute check-in, there's a monthly hour, 2 hours, there's a quarterly 4 hours or 8 hours. I've done it multiple ways. The way that I've found to be the best that I would recommend to you this year is already get on the calendar every quarter when you're going to review, again, if we're talking about your personal plan, your personal intentional improvement plan for every day, or whether it is a team objective, go ahead at the beginning of the year and go ahead and get the quarterly check-ins. But in the first month, I'm going to challenge you for the first 3 months, it needs to be monthly. Here's why. No plan is good while it's on paper. It's only good when it's put into practice. So get it off of paper, get it into practice, and be reviewing it every 30 days and tweaking it before it really becomes your plan. I've walked out of some of my year-end reviews as if I was Moses coming down from Mount Sinai. I had the plan. And then sure enough, I found out by the time I got to putting it into implementation, it needed to be crashed on a bunch of rocks because it wasn't that good. It needs to be developed, it needs to be cultivated, it needs to be activated, and it needs to be assessed to make sure that it's on your plan. So again, yes, every quarter, we are reviewing that as a team. I'm reviewing it as an individual. But in the first quarter, I'm reviewing it every month to make sure that it's working.
What you just said made me think of something that Dan Cathy said a couple years ago, and that's from Chick-fil-A. He said, marry the message, date the method. And that is, you have your message in place. You have the culture of what you do, but you might need to change your methods a little bit throughout the year. And sometimes we get we love our method. We love the way that we do things. We love the way that we set it up in January, and we don't want to have to mess with it in July or even in September. But it's important that if we really want to keep the message on track sometimes, and the culture on track, and the way that we are moving things and where we want to go, we do need to be able to hold that very loosely in order to tweak it and play with it. And I love being able to have that on the calendar already in January or February or whenever you're listening to this. Whenever you listen to this and start to apply this, it's never too late. I say treat every Monday like New Year's Day. We'll say Happy New Monday, Happy New Week. It's every Monday can be a new fresh start. So, and that's right in line with point number 5 when John talks about continual change is essential for continual improvement, because you're going to learn those, right? So then on these pillars, do you care to share what your pillars are? Are there those 4, or do you have categories that have subcategories, or share what yours are?
Yeah, thanks. And they're very close to John, but let me give you mine as example for you. The biggest thing that I would tell anybody listening on the pillars, the things that support the life you want to live. And that's the way I look at them. They are literally pillars. These are the things that must be settled, secure, and reinforced every single year for me to get to the life that I want to live. That's what John's talking about by pillars. So for me, my pillars are, I have 5. And they've been my 5 for 19 years. I perfected it for 4 years. It took me 4 years to get the pillars that I really wanted. And then here's my pillars. And every pillar, 5 pillars, every pillar has a three categories that I reinforce to make that a strong pillar. So pillar number 1 is personal. And that is how I'm personally growing, how I'm spiritually stable, and how I personally am leading. How am I leading myself? So it's leadership, it's spiritual, and then it is growth. Growth is a big enough category. My second one is family. Family is super, super, super important to me. And so I have how I reinforce my family with my relationship with my wife, how I reinforce my relationship with my immediate family, and how I reinforce my relationship at the family level with my extended family. My mom will be 95 in just a few weeks. And so how do I extend in my family? The third area for me is financial. How I save, how I spend, and how I invest is how I look at financials. And I'm going kind of fast. You guys can back up and hit rewind here if you need to. My fourth category is what I call my calling. Many of you would call it your vocation, or some of you are nonprofit leaders, you would call it your ministry. For me, what I do is so aligned with my calling. So it is how I lead the team, how I lead the business, and how I lead our mission, because it's my calling. And so our mission is our nonprofit, our business is our business performance, and then our people is the team that helps us with the business performance. And I have a plan on each of those three. And then finally is my community. And my community is my neighborhood. That's my immediate community. It's my church. That's my worship community. And it is my neighborhood, my city. How am I engaged in making a difference in my city? And so those are my 15 categories around those 5 pillars.
I love that. And if you need to go back and rewind and write those down, that's great. But feel free to make, for those of you who are listening, make your own. Really look and personalize this. This should absolutely be what is personal to you, because look what Mark did. John, as his mentor, he made this very personal to him. My last question for you really lands on his last one, which is focus. How is it with all the things that you run with your 5 pillars and your 3 subcategories, making it 15 points, with the children in your life, the large business that you run, the travel that you do? How do you keep focused on these? Do you have an accountability partner? Do you have someone who checks in with you? Is there somebody that holds you accountable to make sure that you're keeping the main things?
Yeah, so absolutely, without a doubt, my partner in my priorities, my partner in my schedule, my partner in travel and juggling is Kimberly Wetzel. She's been on John and my team for about 19 years now. She's been my executive partner, my executive assistant for about 12 years. And when I get finished with my year-end review, the first thing that I do is I call in my wife. She is the chairman of my executive advisor council. My personal advisory council is chaired by my wife, Stephanie. Stephanie, do you like the plan? Do you think the plan will make us better? Do you think the plan is something that we could buy in together as a couple? She's my first meeting. She comes and she does not rubber stamp it. Let's be really clear. She picks it apart, and she also assesses how I did the year before. But that's my first meeting. My second meeting is with Kimberly. Kimberly, this is what Stephanie and I agreed is the plan. This is what we think the plan is going to look like. These are the moments in my schedule that needs to be protected. And she begins to put it into play. And she is the executor. She is the execution element of my life plan, making sure that it's on point. She's accountability. She's making sure that happens. Now, I'm getting into the weeds a little bit, but here's what I will tell you. John talked about this focus thing. I decided years ago that Stephanie and I spent 18 months building the home that we're living in now. And we tweaked it, and we cared about paint colors, and we decided floor covering, we decided shrubs, we decided all of that stuff. But forget homes, because those are pretty complicated. And by the way, Stephanie and I stayed married during building a home together.
Congrats.
Kudos to us. Yeah. But you have people that spend hours, days, months planning their family vacation. And yet they give no thought to the life they want to live. They put no intentionality into what they want to be important in their life. And so I believe that focus on a better you. That's why I made this digital products every day with purpose available to you for a low $49. because I believe that your intentionality around your life should be the one thing you focus on this entire year. It should be the focus. I'm very influenced by a book called The One Thing by Gary Keller. And he challenges us to get one thing to focus on in the sweet spot of our day, which for me is the morning, and focus on that one thing. So how do I run all of these things and stay focused on personal growth? Traci, every day of the week, I have a one thing that I focus in the 4-hour sweet spot of my day. And everything else gets put on hold, and I focus on that. It could be a business initiative. It could be a family need that we have to focus on. But every day, one thing is going to get 4 hours of my undivided focus to make sure that it works. And I get up pretty early, so my one thing 4-hour segment is quite early. A lot of times I'm done with my one thing for 4 hours before some people are getting up in the morning. God's just blessed me with some DNA from my mom that allows me to do that. But get focused and put something into practice. And for all of us at the beginning of this, you need to go do every day with purpose for that incredible deal that we put out there for our podcast listeners. Traci, the standout statement that we've been driving home today is thoughts today determine action tomorrow. And so what is your thinking today that's going to make a difference? Hey, James from Germany is a podcast listener, and James said this. He sent this to us on a recent episode called Leadership Expectations. By the way, if you missed that one, we're going to put that in the show notes because that is a great podcast. Here's what James from Germany said. He said, I listen just about every day after my morning devotion and prayer as I'm walking my dog. But this one, talking about leadership expectations, spoke to me even more than any of the others. I've always battled being accused of having too high of expectations on myself, and that is often intimidating to others. This episode has once again shown me that I need to work on how I communicate those expectations on others and ensure that I am not expecting of others what I expect of myself. I need to encourage them to expect more of themselves versus them feeling that they need to live up to the expectations I put on them because sometimes I make them too high. James, I remember that episode because I was talking about that I struggle with the same thing. I'm so glad, James, and all the rest of you, that we're growing together. The beginning of this year, the beginning of this week, let's go make a difference because everyone deserves to be led well.